But it's recording.
All right.
We can
So,
we can start. So,
yes.
takže začneme a Julie představí dnešního přednášejícího, tak předávám slovo.
So, thank you everyone for coming to Danilo's talk, and it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Danilo Albergaria, who graduated in history and science journalism and did his PhD in philosophy of science. And in his postdoc at the University of Leiden, his main research topic was analysis of the media portrayal of astrobiology and the expectations that we have in the field. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to him and thank him again for joining us today.
All right, great. Thank you so much for the presentation, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here to present this work for you and to discuss the issues that I think this work presents, and of course you're probably interested in not only understanding how the media is portraying astrology, but in discussing the main problems that we might have regarding the communication of the search for life elsewhere. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have the presentation here in PowerPoint. Let's see if it all goes through well. Okay. Can you see my
Not yet.
my screen?
Oh, yeah,
I see it
I
now.
can now.
Okay, is it full screen for you?
Well, it's
Well,
not
almost.
Almost full screen. Let me just check quickly here if there is another way to go full screen here. Let's see if doing that works. What are you seeing now?
It's the same as before.
It's the same as before, but
Don't
personally,
worry.
I can see it quite well, so I think it's okay.
Don't worry. It's
Okay.
like 80% of the screen.
Okay, so everybody can read and see what's written here, right? Hi, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, we're okay.
All right, great. So, as Julie mentioned, my postdoc in Leiden University in the Netherlands was focused on understanding how astrobiology is being portrayed in the media. Let me just set the clock here to not lose track of time because I speak too much. uh, so, so this project was financed by the Dutch Research Agenda and the Origin Center in the Netherlands. And I don't know if you know this or you probably know this, but there's still quite not much research on the public understanding of astrobiology and how astrobiology is being portrayed in the public sphere, or how much the public understand what are the main questions that astrobiology is trying to answer, what are the main challenges that the field is currently facing, and so on. So this research starts to fill that gap, but I opted for a specific approach to it. I opted to understand exactly what are the main flashpoints, let's say, of problems regarding the communication of astrobiology, specifically the branch of astrobiology that is focused on the search for life elsewhere, because of course astrobiology is a very, very broad field that tries to answer questions about the origins of life and so on. So specifically looking into the search for life elsewhere, how the scientific search for life elsewhere is playing out, and how this is being portrayed in the media, and more specifically, what are exactly the main speculations and promises and expectations that are being set in the public sphere about astrobiology. So we opted to not only look into newspapers articles, but also to look into press releases, how the institutional communication of research is being played out. And also we included the discourse that is on the papers that are being like covered by the media. I'll explain a little bit more of methodology going on with this presentation. But like the motivation is what I already explained to you, and what I mean about like expectations or promises and expectations is the expectation that the search for life is going to detect life elsewhere in some way, like either by detecting a biosignature in an exoplanet, or past life, signs of past life on Mars, or a biosignature in a frozen moon of the solar system, and so on. And as you're going to see, there are some, very high expectations that are being set on the public sphere about the near future of the search for life elsewhere. And of course, that we also looked into speculative content, what are the main speculations that are being expressed by scientists, by institutions, by science journalists, by science communicators, and so on. These two categories I came up with, after reading a lot of material and making a brief thematic analysis. And of course, that when you're dealing with highly speculative content and setting up high expectations, generating hype, you might incur into a risk of risking of the field's credibility. If you have a lot of false alarms on the way, like a lot of claims of the detection of life elsewhere that doesn't confirm, that are not confirmed later, then it's something that it is known that not living up to the expectations may damage the field's credibility. From studies on the sociology of science related to the expectations related to science, there's a lot of literature analyzing how not living up to the expectations may harm a field credibility and the public interest and the public support. So that's the main concern of the project. So let's look into what the history of this hype. Now, we have an early, even earlier examples, but I started the research in late 1990s because I thought that the case of ALH 84001 Martian meteorite was emblematic of what we're talking about, and because the huge media frenzy that it caused at the time helped kickstart NASA Astrobiology Institute. It's well known that NASA used the public attention that the claim generated to foster the foundation of the NASA Astrobiology Institute. I'm not going into any details of these cases, just remembering you about what happened in the past. So in 2010, of course, we have the case of the Mono Lake purportedly arsenic-eating microbe, let's say, right? That a little bit later, as you know, the history probably scientists around, in internet blogs, demolished the claim, and that was a very, very emblematic case. There is a very interesting profile of Felisa Wolf-Simon in New York Times, published, I think, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, maybe, that deals with what is she doing now and how she's trying to rebuild her career. This is a textbook case of what might go wrong with communication of research results. And NASA made a fuss about the study, and of course that the communication went wrong, and of course not only the communication but the science went wrong. Then there's the very famous phosphine gas detection in the upper clouds, the upper deck clouds of Venus. This is still under very heated debate. I'm not completely updated on this issue. There are some very recent developments of the debate around the potential detection of phosphine in Venus. And Yuli, knowledgeable as she is, she probably can talk a lot about this. If you want to discuss this
well,
after the presentation.
In very brief, it looks like the phosphine is really there, but the concentration is the main question, and future missions will help ascertain that. It's completely possible that it's much lower than in the first paper, so it was reported.
All right, great. And is there some development about the biogenicity of the phosphine there?
Well, if the concentration is low, it can be accounted for by volcanic activity and lightning, according to some papers. So, it depends on the concentration, really.
All right, great. Thank you, Julie. And the latest example of how these things play out in the media is happened in September of 2023 with the paper produced by the team in Cambridge, led by Nico Madhusudan, that characterized the atmosphere of a potential Haitian planet, which is a hypothetical kind of mini Neptune that is potentially has a very it is entirely covered by a ocean underneath an hydrogen atmosphere, and they characterized the atmosphere. If I remember correctly, they detected with high confidence methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with James Webb Space Telescope. But the paper itself came with a very highly contentious, speculative claim of detection of dimethyl sulfide, which on Earth is a biomarker. And this potential detection had a very low confidence. It was a very low confidence detection. It should not be there in the paper, but they went with it on the paper. The reviewers let it go through, and then we had this thing went out into the media, and a lot of media outlets jumped upon the opportunity to talk about potential life detection, extraterrestrial life detection. And of course, that I included here some examples in Portuguese and Spanish from the Latin America press. So the one on the left reads, "Alien life. NASA analyzes molecule in distant planet, which on Earth is only produced by living beings." And this is a Folha de São Paulo, the main Brazilian newspaper, and the main Argentinian newspaper on the right is K218b, the exoplanet discovered by NASA with potential signs of life. And then, of course, that, and we have this, I think the worst coverage came with the story written by Palab Ghosh in the BBC, because not specifically the report in BBC is bad communication, I think, but Palab went on Twitter to say that there was new tantalizing evidence of life on the exoplanet, and with like some remarks on the excitement shown by the researchers and so on. And of course, that like the internet went crazy with that, with memes and so on. And the main researcher, sorry, just another thing, which less than a month later, the BBC ran a story about with a very very typical way of portraying things, which is saying that scientists are saying that finding life elsewhere is only a matter of time, and you're going to see that this is somewhat common in the coverage of the search for life elsewhere. There's this trope, that scientists and science communicators use a lot, which is like life is going to be detected in the next few decades. Sometimes, it was very funny to read an article in an interview on El País, Spanish newspaper, with a scientist there saying, the news was from 2010, I think, and he was saying, oh, within a decade we are going to find a life. In 2020, you're going to find life and so on. And I was reading that in 2023, 2024, and it was very funny. And if you search for it, you're going to find a lot of these cases. Of course, that a less serious press, went for the usual images of aliens and so on. And of course, a major update in 5 years. You find this a lot in the press, scientists promising life detection, but not only scientists, but journalists, science communicators, you see a lot of people promising. And there is also a very common narrative of progress, like we are making progress towards detecting life, which is a very contentious claim because we don't know exactly what we're looking for, so on. Anyway, I'm going to give you an example about how this thing can go really wrong in the communication side of things. So Nico Madhusudan is the leader of the Cambridge team that published that work on K218b, and he gave an interview later in April 2024 in LBC, one of the leading radio stations in Britain. And I'm going to show you an excerpt of how he was presented by the journalist. The dramatic tone is very, very interesting. And what he said about the chances of finding life in one of the potential Haitian worlds that he is researching with James Webb. Can you hear the audio or not?
I can.
All right.
Not sure about the classroom.
No, we neither. We don't read it.
You don't hear it?
No, no.
Okay. So let me just check if it's possible to.
Or send me a link to that video.
Yeah, that's going to give you some work, but if it's difficult to hear it, I'm going to just tell you what he says,
Okay.
So let me just check with the sound here. Okay, if I configure the sound here on Zoom, I can maybe I can okay, I think it's here. Let's try it. Can you hear it?
No,
No, sorry.
Can you hear it? No?
No.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you what he says. The journalist presents Nico as imagine Professor Nico. He's looking into the data and so on, and then a very dramatic tone is used. This could be it. I'm going to make the most important finding in the history of science. And then he goes to the interview, and he asks Niku. About what are the chances of having found life in K2ATB atmosphere. And then Niku says, at this stage, I would say 50-50. And the journalist is struck, and he says, wow, that high. And then Niku tries to, explain, like all good science, it would be gradual, it would not be immediate, maybe not with this observation or this particular result, but maybe in a few months, maybe in a year, it could come anytime. But I would say it's 50-50. So Niku puts the chance of having found life on K218b as a 50-50% chance. If you read, an interesting thing was, if you read the press releases that came out of the James Webb Space Telescope communication team, you see that the claim of life detection was buried there in the middle of the text. It wasn't highlighted in the headline, or even, it wasn't highlighted at all. And I think, the communication team there did a great job in not sensationalizing the claim, and which is sort of what it's somewhat rare to see that, because sometimes, the institutional communication sometimes goes with, trying to promote the most astonishing dimension of a research result and so on. But I think they did a good job there. If you're curious, you can easily find the press release. So we opted to try to understand, these things, and how this is playing out in the media, in the public sphere, by doing a content analysis. No adaptation, for content analysis, you have to have a code book with questions that you're going to ask about the text that you're going to analyze. Sometimes you adapt, sometimes you adopt other frameworks, but since there is almost virtually no research on astrobiology in the media, with few exceptions, I specifically developed a code book for this research, and we analyzed from newspapers. We analyzed two in English, New York Times and The Guardian, 3 in Portuguese, the 2 main newspapers in Brazil, Folha and Estadão, and the main newspaper in Portugal, Público, and the main newspaper in Spain, which is El País. And the corpus was built around the news articles. So what I did was I filtered what were the news articles that dealt with the search for life elsewhere, and then I went to the corresponding press releases, and then I went to the corresponding papers, and I did a comparative analysis, comparative content analysis, analyzing the news articles that are related to the press release, that are related to the papers. If there were no press releases related to the news articles, then news articles were excluded from the analysis. Of course, if there weren't any papers, also the news article was excluded. There are some news articles that are based on presentations in conferences, in seminars, and so on, and these were excluded. We only looked into news articles that are specifically covering or related to a paper, a published paper, and that paper has a press release. So this was very important for the comparative framework that we developed. Just an important mention that I have to this research was done in close collaboration with my supervisors, which were Pedro Russo at Leiden University, Jonica Smits from the Science Communication and Society group in the Leiden University, also with Celina Hinatigala, the head of the communication of the Earth Life Science Institute in Tokyo, Japan, and with Dallas Vetter, a master's student from Leiden University that helped me a lot with content analysis. So the corpus in total, we analyzed 630 articles. Of them, 188 papers, 170 press releases, and 272 news articles, which we had like 145 sets of papers, press releases, and news articles. And you cannot imagine how the workload is, like to do this kind of stuff, because I had a lot of questions to ask for the text. Like I had 7 different categories that I was trying to capture in these articles. Here they are. Like I came up with 5 kinds of speculations that are, circulating in the media about the search for life elsewhere. I'll explain that in a minute, but just to complete like what I was saying, the work consists, the brunt of the work is like you ask, are there speculations about the outcomes of the research for life elsewhere? And then you check, you read the entire text, you read it again, and then you try to answer those questions. Are there like the expression of the expectations that extraterrestrial life will be detected? Yes or no? And then I put that all on a huge Excel spreadsheet, and you cannot believe, like the amount of data that come out of this stuff. It was a lot of work to do this. But anyway, what kind of research is not does not have like a lot of work, right? Anyway, so we had like 5 categories of speculations about the outcomes of the search for life elsewhere. I'm going to show you examples about all this, but just for you to have a clearer picture of the framework here. Speculations about the significance of research result for the life elsewhere. How does research, is the research like they say, like a paradigm shift for the search for life, or a very impactful research, and so on. So are there speculations about the significance? Are there speculations about the evidential status of a research result? Like we saw there, like in the K218B's case, there was a speculation about if the potential DMS detection was evidence of life. Of course, and you're going to see that the most common kinds of speculations are speculations about the existence of life elsewhere itself, so there might be life underneath the surface of Enceladus. This would be, like a very weak but still speculative expression about the existence of life elsewhere, and speculations about the conditions and ingredients for life elsewhere, which are the most common kind. I'm going to show you examples in a minute. And then 3 kinds of expressions of expectations or promises about near future of the search for life, which is the expectation that extraterrestrial life will be detected, the promise that extraterrestrial life will be detected, the sense or the expectation that the field is making progress or is going to make progress towards the detection of life or towards being successful in the search. And of course, also the expectation that technological development itself is going to provide the evidence or answers for the search for life. So let's see what we found in the corpus, right? So these graphs, I'm going to just explain it, like very quickly. So these bars are, like the red bar is for the percentage of research paper that showed the particular kind of speculative content. The green bar in the middle is the percentage of press releases that showed this kind of speculation. And the blue bar is the percentage of news articles that showed this kind of speculation. And on the right, I am giving you some examples about this kind of speculation. So, for example, this speculation about the outcomes of the search for life. The first one, it is highlighted in orange here, is that and with the discovery by NASA and other scientists of Kepler 452b plus 12 other possible habitable planets, it may have become just a little more likely that humans will find extraterrestrial life on another planet. It is a speculative expression of around the outcomes of the search for life, although a weak one. And the other one, it is quite possible that within our lifetimes, atmospheric studies of these extrasolar planets will provide the first evidence of biological life beyond Earth. As you can see, you know, like some of the content that I'm calling speculative are not specifically bad science communication. Yes, it is speculative, but it is contextual also. It's giving the public context, right? So part of the analysis, of the interpretive analysis on future studies that I'm trying to project, you know, like trying to come up, is how to distinguish bad science communication from legitimate speculative content. When is the speculative content bad science communication? This is very hard to capture. In content analysis, it's very hard to come up with a very, very objective framework that it's going to be used in any language by any researcher, that it's going to yield, you know, like some results that, you know, like might yield something like, oh, this is bad communication. This kind of speculation is bad communication, or this kind of speculation is legitimate. But anyway, let's go with. Just one thing, you know, like you're going to see that a pattern emerges from these graphs, which is the papers. Of course, you know, like it was expected. The papers are the part of the corpus that exhibit the less amount of speculative content and content related to expectations and promises. The press releases show a lot more than papers, and the news articles show more than press releases. But there are two categories in which, you know, like the press releases show a little bit more of speculative content. And my interpretation about this particular speculation, the speculation about the significance of the research result, is that this result that we have, you know, like that, you know, like 28% of the press releases exhibit this form of speculative content more than what we see in news articles, is because, you know, like press releases are by nature trying to promote the significance of the research so that the press can pick up on that and build a new story. You know, like they're trying to get the attention of the media for the research, and the best way to do that is trying to say something about, oh, this research is really, really important, or this really it's really impactful, and so on. So this is the way that, you know, like press information officers are trying to get media attention. I'm not going to read, you know, like everything, but I hope that you can read it. If you want to read again, and like I'll just make the presentation available for you, right? And then the third kind of evidence of speculation is speculation about the evidential status, about the research being an evidence of detection of life, which, not surprisingly, is a very low occurrence, has a very low occurrence. You know, like only 3% of the papers and press releases exhibit that. You know, like only 5% of news articles show that. I can explore later this, but we're reaching, you know, like half an hour of presentation. I have to go a little bit quicker here. But then we reach, you know, like this is very interesting, because then we reach speculations about the existence of life elsewhere. And then we see, you know, like a very high rate of occurrence in news articles. Almost half of news articles has some form of speculation about the existence of life in another body in the solar system or in an exoplanet. So, and this is, I feel like this is one of the funniest examples, you know, like the first one. And this is also registered in a video. So pressed during the news conference about the possibility of life on Gliese 581G, Dr. and I don't remember exactly his name, protested that he was an astronomer, not a biologist. Then he relented, saying that speaking strictly personally, he believed that the chances of life on this planet are almost 100%. And he says that live on television. It's a very funny case of estimating what are the chances of life existing elsewhere beyond Earth. But there are also less problematic, let's say, kinds of speculative content about this. And the most common speculative content that we found was the speculations about the conditions and ingredients for life, the existence of conditions and ingredients for life elsewhere. And I think this is also not surprising because, first of all, this reflects, the state of the knowledge right now, and the fact that a lot of research in astrobiology today is focused on trying to understand what are the sufficient and necessary conditions for life to exist in another world. What are the ingredients for life? Can life exist, with different sorts of ingredients that we know that are, required for life to exist here on Earth and so on. And so this is very common. This is a very common thing. More than half of news articles contain this, almost half of press releases contain this, and a very high percentage of papers also exhibited this. And now dealing with the promises and expectations, as happened with the speculations about the evidential status of a particular research result, this is very rare, and I think also not surprisingly, although I thought I was going to capture a little bit more of this on the corpus, because I feel like this is an impression of this is not warranted by research, but I feel like scientists and science communicators, they feel free to speculate about not only the evidential status of a particular result pointing out to the existence of life, but speculating about the future, that we are going to detect life, in the near future, when they are not really saying something about their research results. So when they're given an interview about a different topic, or a related topic, or they are just giving an interview about their interests and so on, then they seem to feel free to speculate a little bit more about this. But since we are looking into news articles that are really related to a published paper, then we see, a very, very little occurrence of this thing. Then the expectation that the search for life is making progress, and the most common way of framing this is we are making progress towards life detection. And this is the second case in which, press releases exhibit a little bit more of this sort of content, a little bit more than news articles. And I also feel that this is related to the character of press releases. Press releases are designed to draw the media attention, and the way to do this is to say, well, this research is part of this march towards, get a better understanding on the subject, or we are marching towards a positive result. There is a lot of pressure on scientists as an institution to show progress, and this is one of the things that I think it's very interesting for us to discuss after my presentation about what kind of systemic pressures are existing, and driving scientists and scientific institutions to sometimes exaggerate the significance of their research result in the public sphere. And then the last kind of promise expectation, the most occurring one, was the hope or the expectation that technological development, technological progress is going to give us evidence, at least signs of life elsewhere in the near future. And this is, I think it's more common, even more common when you're dealing with news articles that are not specifically related to a specific paper. Then presenting a breakout of speculative content by research area. So the thing is, these 5 categories that I came up with, trying to understand if the speculative content is more prominent in exoplanet research or in research of space exploration on the solar system, for example. And if it is also related to SETI, or if it is related to the origins of life kind of research and so on. So speculative content was pretty uniform in all of the areas that we categorized, no significant difference here. But when you're looking into promises and expectations, there is a prominent occurrence on exoplanet research. So when you're dealing with the expectation that the research is going to present results, that the field is making progress, that technological progress is going to give us evidence of life in the near future, then you see a lot more of this content happening in exoplanet research than in the coverage of solar system exploration, and even less, in SETI or origins of life sub-area. We also mapped out and measured where do the speculations and promises occur. So here is a breakout of all the data. I'm going to just explore a little bit the fact that we found the most prominent actors, let's say, in expressing speculative content and promises and expectations are the author of the text itself, the author of the press release, and the author of the news articles, and the author of the paper itself that is being covered by the press release and the news articles. Not much happening in the title, in the headlines, and not much happening, associated with an outside expert or other kinds of sources, like the institution itself is saying something, that's quoted as saying something about that. But you can see, that there is a lot of speculative content and expectations being expressed by the authors of the papers themselves and the science journalist or science communicator. So some takeaways, from all of this data. As I said, before, scientists, science do speculate a lot on conditions and ingredients and the existence of life in news stories and press releases. I think they feel free to do that because it's the safest area which they can speculate in. And I feel like speculation about both the existence and the existence of conditions and ingredients for life elsewhere are a lot of the time very legitimate. It is legitimate contextualization. It is not necessarily bad science communication. So as I said, this is what in a further studies and a further project I'm thinking about doing, is trying to understand a little bit more in detail what constitutes exactly bad communication when you're dealing with speculative content in this sort of material. And there is this high occurrence of speculations on existence and conditions. And I think that this is related to the current state of the knowledge in the area and the current focus of the knowledge in the area. What I mean by that is that the current state of knowledge is we know very little about what exactly are the necessary and sufficient conditions for life to exist in other places in the cosmos. And as the focus of the area is shifted towards, like trying to understand the conditions and ingredients, then I think, like it's very easy to understand why, like the speculative content is being expressed about that and about the potential existence of life elsewhere. Also, I found, like a missing distinction. I don't have quantitative data on this, but I can say a lot because I read all this stuff in depth. There's a missing distinction about the necessary and sufficient conditions for life elsewhere. I think if we are trying to do a better job in communicating the science of astrobiology and specifically the search for life, I think scientists and science communicators can do a better job trying to explain to the public exactly what we think are the necessary conditions for life and what we think are the sufficient conditions for life, and if a particular environment presents some of those, and how it is considered with this distinction in mind. There's also a lot of abuse of Earth likeness, expressions about Earth likeness. I think, Julie participated in the Lawrence Center workshop that we organized in Leiden. This was one of the main flashpoints of discussions, which is there's a lot of abuse with these expressions, like Earth twin, Earth analog, Earth 2.0, and so on. So you see a lot of this sort of expressions being expressed related to an exoplanet from which sometimes we know only the diameter, let's say, of the exoplanet, or sometimes we know only the mass of the exoplanet and the distance to its parent star, and that's it. And sometimes we see a lot of association with the results that indicate very few things. We know very little about these bodies, and then we see like a potential Earth analog, a potential Earth 2.0, and so on. There's a lot of abuse of that. I think we should avoid this like the plague, avoid using this sort of stuff like the plague. Because one thing that could be argued is that why not using Venus analog or Venus 2.0 when you find like an exoplanet that might have like an Earth mass. And of course, most common interpretations, most common expectations are the progress in technological development. I already explored a little bit of that. Just to finalize the presentation, I'm reaching 45 minutes now. Just a couple more slides, as I said, the low occurrence of speculations on the outcomes of evidence, evidential status of the research and the promises of life detection. I feel like it's related to the corpus, although I don't have quantitative data to back up this claim. I feel like this is related to the corpus because I found a lot more of this stuff in news articles that are not specifically related to a paper, but this sort of research is still to be done. If you're interested in doing a follow-up, you can think about doing some of this and how research that is being covered by the media that are related to the papers, how the coverage differs from news articles that are not related to papers or and so on. There's other things I already explored with you. And there were some other uncategorized speculations and promises there. I'm not going to have time to say something about this. And of course, that this is what we took away, from a little bit of what we discussed in the Lawrence Center workshop last year. I think we have to be very, very honest with the public about what we don't know about life, about conditions of life, about the ingredients of life elsewhere, and so on. I think there is a lot of room to improvement in communication about exactly what we don't know, and the no one knows. This is the first one, and the fact that there are unknown unknowns. And of course, that like related to this, epistemological modesty, being very, very careful about what we can say safely with the data that we have about other worlds, other environments. This, it should be paramount in the communication of the field. I think there's a lot of room to improve on that. And we should be careful about what kind of scientific progress we are promising. I'm saying that because the most common image of scientific progress is the progress towards truth. We are always approaching truth and so on. And in the case of astrobiology and search for life elsewhere, there is a very common image of we are making progress towards the discovery of life. We are approaching the discovery of life. And this is very, very common, not only in communication materials, but you can see that being expressed even in materials that are specifically designed to foster discussions on the problems of this kind of thing. Sometimes they slip on the sensation or the image that we are making progress towards the discovery of life, which we cannot know if that's true or if it's going to transpire that way. And I'll leave the last thing to discuss with you if you're interested about the systemic issues to look for. There is a growing crisis in science journalism, a growing role of PR in science communication, institutional communication, a lot of pressure for scientists to go public, to have a high public profile and compete for funding with this high profile. That's it. I hope you have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danilo. Are there any questions from the classroom, Jan?
Yeah. Máme nějaké dotazy. Klidně můžete i česky, my to přeložíme. Ukázalo se po zkušenosti s minulou přednáškou, že to tak asi bude lepší. A samozřejmě, pokud chcete přímo anglicky, dáme brání. Tak, máme nějaký dotaz? Okay.
So in the meantime...
Just start, Julie.
So in the meantime, I would like to ask about the relatively low occurrence of speculations in the field of SETI. Is it because of the corpus and the relatively lower numbers of papers related to SETI, or do you think we would observe a similar trend if we looked at articles not associated with published papers and press releases?
Yeah, I also find that aspect fascinating. Or maybe they are just more schooled in not being so spectacular in their public releases. Or what do you think about that?
So, sorry, can you ask me again? I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I just said that I found this SETI thing also fascinating. And I can only speculate about this reason. Maybe they are more schooled about not being so spectacular about press releases. Or what do you think about that?
Okay, so let me show you again, the graphs for the relative occurrence of speculations and expectations in sub areas. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is speculations by sub area. What we see here is that the total number of articles that are related to SETI is low, but the percentage of speculative content is on par with other areas.
I see it now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is very, so this is, So the total number of articles is low, but it is the same, exactly the same percentage of the occurrence of speculative content with exoplanet research. But so this is speculations, right? Mm-hmm. The funny thing and the interesting thing is that when you look into the promise of life detection, or the expectation that the field is making progress, or the technology is going to provide evidence, then you see a very low occurrence of these things with SETI studies and the coverage of SETI studies. Only one article showed a kind of promise and expectation that SETI, or I can, this is a very good question. I myself didn't ask myself about this. Then later I'm going to take a look at the corpus to see exactly what is this one. If it is, a press release, a newspaper article, or something like that, to see exactly, what is the speculation, what is the promise or the expectation that is being expressed there. Trying to interpret this, I feel like, so first of all, the fact that exoplanet research features prominently here, I feel that this reflects the current hope that the James Webb Space Telescope and future devices are going to return data that could indicate some sort of biosignature detection, right? We can look into the specific kinds of promises and expectations. It would be interesting, but I feel like since, as you said, SETI researchers are probably very schooled on not going sensationalistic with their results and so on. I feel like that there is a sort of extra they are being extra careful with not promising anything, right? I feel like this is the main reason why you don't have a lot of promises and expectations that SETI is going to give us a lot of positive results. Mm-hmm. I feel like also the nature, if I remember correctly, the nature of the research that was being published was some reports from Breakthrough Listen, and yeah, so those were the main focus on when you're dealing with SETI or possible technosignature detection. And I feel like Breakthrough Listen, the team that did the communication there, not only the scientists but the team that did communication, they were very, very careful in presenting results. And of course, that the results were negative, so there's not a lot much to promise, when you have these sort of results coming. I think that's it. But it is a kind of a very interesting thing to explore.
Yeah, definitely. So if I may provide one hypothesis, I think this is related to the current status of the field, because exoplanet research and solar system research are undergoing sort of boom right now with this everything is possible view of the stuff, while SETI and the origins of life are, let's say, older fields which were booming in 1960s or like this. And right now there is not much happening. So people sort of stop expecting miracles.
Yeah, of course, I agree completely. I think it's a very good explanation for it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there is also that, I don't know the name of the curve, but the expectations from any technology, and they are like steeply increasing, then they reach some peak, then crash down and actually reach some plateau later. So that definitely might explain this huge sensationalism in exoplanet research.
Yeah.
So, any questions? Nějaké otázky?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, it's a bit more a grounded question. How should we communicate these, and we were talking about exoplanet research or any, extraterrestrial life to public in normal conversation to, keep them interested, but not overhype it and or lose their interest immediately.
Okay, so this is a very interesting, very difficult question to answer also, and this is exactly the questions that we're asking ourselves in the workshop there that Julie participated in the Netherlands last year. How to best communicate this sort of thing with the public, but you're specifically asking about like a normal conversation and so on. Yeah. So first of all, there's an interesting thing about this, which is when I was at the beginning of my project, when I was presenting the project to the science communication community there in Leiden, the science communication department, and it, I think, like only one person there was really into astrobiology. The rest was, like they knew about astrobiology, the very little about astrobiology. And so I was presenting a little bit of the history of astrobiology and so on. But then when I showed, that BBC News, possible evidence of life in K218b, I remember a very interesting comment from one of the researchers there, which was, well, I don't know anything about astrobiology, she said, but I'm kind of interested in the possibility of the existence of extraterrestrial life. And in the presentation, I said, the headline should be carbon dioxide and methane detected on an exoplanet. It is huge. It is a very important result and so on. And she said, if this headline was carbon dioxide and methane detected in an atmosphere of an exoplanet, I wouldn't click on it. But I would surely click on this if I saw something about possible evidence of life on an exoplanet. And this presents us with a conundrum, with a very, very problematic and with a dilemma, which is how to promote the public engagement with science, the public, the interest for astrobiology and for astrobiology research without being clickbaity, let's say, or without sensationalizing a little bit of the content, let's say, right? I don't have a particular, a ready-made answer for that, but I feel like, if you look into that particular case, the journalist or, the science news outlet could come up with a headline that could be something like atmospheric characterization of an exoplanet points to a result that in the future could be confirmed or something like that. Well, this is bad, right? I came up with a very bad alternative, but it should be said that the result is have a very low confidence. It's a very low confidence detection, which means that we should communicate honestly with the public when the result is a strong detection, when the result is very uncertain. There's a huge discussion in science communication about how to communicate uncertainty. And one of the things is that scientists should be straightforward about uncertainty, not hide any sort of the uncertainties that are related to their research. And also, there is another challenge, which is how to convey uncertainty, which is a problem in itself. How do you convey to the public the kind of uncertainty that are related to this sort of results, the communication of these results. But I feel like being honest about this is paramount. What happened in that case is that the scientists chose to put the speculation on the paper. That was, so that was the main point of that case, that they chose to go with the speculation in the paper. And the peer review, I think, should have worked on this thing to say, oh, well, can you really say that this is a possible evidence of life with such a flimsy detection? This is the first thing. And I think, and this points out to what I was saying about the systemic crisis that we're facing. Scientists have a lot of pressure to go public and to have a high profile to go public. So the thing is, so to return to your question, how to do it, I think it has a lot to do with what are your motivations for the communication. If the motivation to communicate with the public is in some sort of way related to you're trying to promote your research, so then you get a high profile and then you get more funding, then you have a lot of motivation to hide uncertainties or to sensationalize the results. And to try to address this problem, I think we should look into the systemic causes of this problem. It's not a problem that is going to be solved only with recommendations like, oh, this is the way to go, or this is so appeals to honest, as I did here, is not really a solution to this sort of problem, although it can be a recommendation, of course. But I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry.
I know it's a very hard question, but I just wondered what you think about it.
Yeah.
Tak jo, ještě někdo má nějaký vstup? Neváhejte se přihlásit. Já si to jinak uzurpuju.
Just one thing. Just one thing. Sorry. I think it's not only I think about being honest with the public and so on. I think this is something that as I'm a philosopher of science, also something that always gets me is that sometimes the scientists themselves and the science communicators themselves should have a little bit more of a sophisticated view related to epistemology. Let's say, I'm advocating for a little bit more of epistemology in the natural sciences courses. Learning about epistemology makes you a lot more careful when dealing with claims or how a result or what a particular result represents. When you learn a little bit about epistemology, you see how complex it is to make any such claim. And then I think scientists could, and science communicators and science journalists could have the tools necessary to say to the public, right? This is a very complex issue. To make such a claim, you have to go through such a huge amount of stages to ascertain that your claim is true. And even then, even when you say, oh, my claim is true because of that and so on, even then it has a lot of inferences involved. There's a lot of interpretation involved in looking into the data and communicating with the public. So I think this is one of the ways to go, maybe.
Yeah, but this surely can be a problematic thing when the system kind of benefits you if you are less epistemologically careful, and you are more civic, more sensational, and get more attention from some grant committees and so on. So there are clearly lots of factors in play, and not always does this more philosophical insight. The approach is not the approach that wins a lot of times.
Yes, of course. I think that if we are trying to get science communication right, we have to look into the systemic causes for the problems of hype and so on. we have a huge problem with science journalists have been losing jobs for so many years now, and what we had in the last couple of decades was that a lot of science journalists became press information officers and science communicators in scientific institutions, but the nature of the work is very different. Science journalism is, by definition, should be a critical way of looking into a particular result, and it's a way of society to examine science and to have a critical stance towards science, not only celebrating the results and so on. And the press information officers are in a job they're not in the job to do a critical evaluation of the work. Although it is part of the job. No, they are also required to look into the work and say, oh, this is not really what the scientists are, this result is not really guaranteed someone, and then they can make a choice, of not going public with the results and so on. But they have a lot of pressure. They have a lot of institutional pressure, their results are being measured by the amounts of news articles that are generated by the press release a lot of times. So if the metrics that are going to be used to evaluate your work is how much attention you're going to grab, then you can be the most honest, critical thinker, like a science communicator. But if the pressure is that, you are going to or you're going to quit the job and do some other stuff in your life. And scientific institutions are also in competition among themselves for funding. So they are competing among themselves to get funding, and to get and to get funding, you have to have media attention. You have to have a high profile and so on. So this is a very complicated situation, very complicated systemic problem.
Yeah, sure.
And I was going to ask about the next steps. So very briefly, since the report from the Leiden workshop was being finalized last month, and it's going to be published soon, or maybe has been, and it just escaped me. And it's mainly recommendations for how to handle the communication itself, as you mentioned. But you also said that the system needs to change to support more honest, evidence-based communication. So how do you think, where do you think we are heading right now in this regard? Because also the upcoming report from the previous CDSLU workshop, Communicating Detection Live in the Universe, led by NASA, had some systemic recommendations as to the support of scientists in not just media training, but in supporting them against online harassment and so on, and how to involve more stakeholders. But if we look at what's happening, especially in the United States right now, do you think we have a chance for the communication landscape to get better in the upcoming years?
I don't think things are looking good for the future. I fear that the problems are only getting worse because as you said, the situation in the United States is very dire, and the universities are being under attack. Clearly, for everyone to see, and there's going to be a lot of funding slashing and so on, and so this is going to affect the situation about the communication of results and so on. So if you're looking into if it is a systemic problem, then you need systemic solutions. Then you're talking about policy. You're talking about maybe reforming how the universities and research institutions compete for research funding. Maybe I don't have a particular solution for that, but maybe coming up with a different sort of not looking at things like competitively, or maybe looking into like more like a collaborative thing, where universities are not pushed into compete with each other in a particular system, a national system, or like a continental system like Europe. But we're dealing with an economic structure that is not going away soon. We're dealing with an economic structure that is there for decades, and is being it's evolving since the internet started to change the communication landscape. And the internet is presenting us with a different challenge, because the way that the social media platforms and like video platforms and podcast platforms, they work. The recommendation algorithms are pushing sensationalistic and clickbaity content. So in order to get attention, you have to go you have to try to sensationalize the content. So we're dealing not only with an economic system, but also a system of information that is let's say it's beyond our powers. We're dealing with the big techs in the United States and how they are operating, and the power that they have is immense. It's huge, and they are operating in a way that it's detrimental to the circulation of information, not only about science but about politics itself. I'm talking from a country that just came out of a very problematic government that went after attacked science and used a lot of misinformation and disinformation with the public. They created a parallel reality here, in which a small manifestation from their their field, that their allies, is portrayed in the internet as a huge manifestation, and the people believe it. So yeah, so this is a very this systemic problems need systemic solutions, and I think it goes through a political change and economic change. Oh, so the white paper is going to be published at the end of this month, Julie.
Thank you. We'll share it with the students.
Yes.
If I may comment on the political aspects or like public aspects of science communication, I think we are now in a very tricky age, because essentially I think that all the hype and sensationalist headlines, they just fuel the anti-science and conspiracy theories, because if you promise cheap energy, aliens, and I don't know, new physics, and then it's not happening, the people feel like they are lying to us, that there must be something they are trying to cover. If you tell them this study was wrong, then it's another fuel, because you see the science is wrong, we were right all the time, the conspiracy theories, they are right because science is wrong. Yeah, it's very, very tricky to balance the communication, because if you are too sensationalist, or if you show science can be wrong, basically both approaches can just provide more arguments for the anti-science guys.
Yes, yeah, and I think also I was thinking about how institutions are they have their hands tied regarding what how to do the communication of a particular science. I'm thinking about like how institutional science, social media profile, like they have a very limited scope of how they can legitimately communicate the science or a particular development. So, as an example, I was thinking about like a very, very competent communication project of the protection of night skies, like in the problem that Starlink is probably it's already causing for astronomers. Those small satellites, like from Elon Musk's Starlink, and it was a very very competent project, very very competent material of science communication that they produced. But the thing is that they institutionally they have to, I'm talking about the International Astronomical Union and their outreach branch. Like the way that they have to produce that kind of material, they still are they are still bound by they have to address some part of the project, what are they doing, and so on, in a way that sometimes they don't have enough, let's say, artistic freedom to let the creativity go already, let's say, and sometimes come up with a very, very engaging thing in social media. And yeah, so, and I feel like, like if the algorithm recommendations were working in a way that, like favors quality information and quality science communication projects, then you'd have a very, very different picture. But they're favoring different stuff. They are favoring what they make money with, and they make money with engagement and what they know for a fact that generates engagement are things that are very, very inducing of emotional reactions in the public. And so quality science communication sometimes are not, they're not going to be able to compete with some, as you said, some allegations of extraordinary allegations about aliens and so on. And so I think regarding like the circulation of information, I think we should address like how the internet is working and how the big tech is dominating the scenario.
Well, yeah. So let's hope we will have opportunity to discuss it sometime in the future again, but the time is up. And thank you very much for your talk. And
Yeah, thank you so much, Danilo.
see you soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. See
It's
you.
nice to see you.